Hey, right, everyone. This is a not a normal live stream. We're not answering questions per se. Although if you've got a question about what we're talking about, then we'll obviously incorporate it. So this is another live stream. This is probably the third one we've done where we're just talking about bigger picture stuff within the homelessness sector. So to say, we're not answering specific questions about particular legal issues. We're just going to talk about the sector in general. Obviously, there's been a bit more material like that on the channel recently, which is seems to be kind of starting some good conversation. So I've always kind of got a list of things to kind of go through, and the others that are going to come. So you might notice that Clara's brand new to the live stream, so welcome, Clara. She's a bit nervous because it's live and it seems a bit scary, but I'm sure it'll be fine. But yeah, I've kind of known Clara now for I don't know since end of last year, I guess, just kind of doing some cool stuff down in the southwest. And obviously Shannon, isn't it? We've been going to we didn't do our birthday the other day, Shannon, because we've been going for like 2 and a bit years now on the live stream. It's pretty good going. So we got this. Let me just say a couple of the bits. As always, please don't share personal data on the live stream chat. Just figure out a way of saying it which is not kind of obvious it's about you. There's more and more reasons why I want to do it that way because I just find it just kind of results in a better quality answers and conversation anyway. So yeah, that'd be great if you just didn't disclose data. And also, if we do talk about anything legal, then it's not legal advice. I'm not sure that we will, but we might do. You never know, do you? So, I think that's it. Yeah. So we've kind of got. I've got this like list of things I think about as we go through. As I say, Shannon and Clara may well kind of have things they want to talk about as well. We're not going to get through it all, but I just want to start clunking through it. Partly because some of them I want to do videos about, just sort of standalone videos at some point, and part of it is because it just helps me. It just helps me talking to people to hear kind of how to make sense of it all. Because some of these genuinely are questions I don't know the answer. But yeah, that's kind of the basis of it really. So yeah, because no one's said a preference to which one to go to, I thought I'd start with this one. In fact, I might just kind of figure out a way of putting it, put it up on the screen briefly. So the first topic, if that's the want of a better word, is this idea that let me just get up on the screen. Is essentially it's a quote I took from someone's LinkedIn post or something. It's someone I know a little bit about their background. So they worked in supported accommodation for a long time, and they've kind of had some interesting roles. They had a bit of influence and bits and pieces, or they still do, I guess. So the first, let me get this big enough so you can see it. So this is the first one. So community is what ends homelessness. Housing people on their own won't be enough. So let me just make that big. I'm not going to keep it up there the whole time. So I'm not doing it. Come on. There we go. So yeah, that's it. And I guess this comes from maybe the more traditional supported housing kind of mentality. And I'm just going to just save this as well so I can keep referring back to it. In fact, I'll put it in the Zoom chat, which the live stream can't see, but it just helps me out. So yeah, that's kind of like this first topic. So yeah, it kind of comes from this idea that without getting people rooted into community, then you're not going to end homelessness. But I think the thinking comes because people who are not rooted into community basically are more likely to have their tenancy fail or whatever, or their kind of future housing fail. And something about it doesn't sit right with me. But it's not that I'm kind of like going to try and blow it out of the water. I think there's obviously some good stuff in there. But that's kind of our starting point. And I guess if I just kind of put my position on it forward just to get us started, um, there's probably two things I'd say. One is that I don't think the charity sector is really, or the traditional charity sector is capable of creating community. That's the first thing I'd say. Um, that's not to say that certain charities can't do it, but I just think generally the kinds of things that you see homeless charities try and do, with the best of intentions to try and create community doesn't work. And that's in part because there's always going to be a power imbalance. If you're a professional and you're paid to be there, that's not genuine relationship. That's not equal relationship. It might, I'm not saying it's bad necessarily, but it's not genuine community. Um, and I think the other thing is that, yeah, well, yeah, I just think community is something that just grows. It either grows kind of naturally or it doesn't. And if communities aren't growing, that's an issue of the sort of society in general. That's not for the homelessness sector to fix. Homelessness sector should, in theory, be about ending homelessness, or certainly that should be the kind of the primary aim. And so if there's a problem with communities, and I absolutely think there is, I think we're very disparate these days. Hey, Andrea, nice to have you here. So I think that's the kind of yeah, for a homelessness sector to try and end something which isn't homelessness. You see the same thing with kind of loneliness. I guess it's a similar kind of angle or a slightly different angle, where you had there's a lot of talk about ending loneliness through in the homelessness sector, and I'm like, okay, that's a good thing to do, but that's not what the homelessness sector is there for. The homelessness sector should be to house, get people housed, and then the issue of alienation and kind of social loneliness is something else needs to fix that. I don't think the homelessness sector is very well suited to do that. So that's my that's my starting point on this point. I don't know if you guys have got any thoughts about that or anything want to kind of ask clarification or if that made sense or not. If you are on the live stream, as I say, there's a little bit of a delay, but if you want to put anything in there, we'll pick it up pretty quick. Shannon?
Yeah, it's proper interesting, and I feel like my own thoughts contradict each other. And I think what you're saying there around it's not for the homelessness sector to fix is interesting because I've been to lots of things recently where the sector is like, there's lots of money going to TA and there's lots of money going to this and this, but it's not addressing the root causes. And actually, what you're kind of talking about is it's not the homelessness sector's responsibility to address those root causes. It's their responsibility to house the person, and then it's up to the whole system to address the root causes, whether that's the NHS, whether it's domestic abuse services, whether it's those interlinking multiple disadvantages. I think at the same time, I do. I've got my main problem with that sentence is that I find it infantilizing and patronizing because you're assuming that a homeless person doesn't already have a sense of community, or you're assuming that they don't have a community that maybe they've lost because they've moved, or even down to like when you go to university, that's a community. When you're in school, your after school club, that's a community. Like how communities form can sort of stay with you, and you can lose them, you can pick them back up again, you can form new ones. And I think it's really it's that whole, it isolates a person just to their homelessness again, rather than going, Joe is a whole homeless person and they've got X, Y, and Z experiences, X, Y, and Z skills, X, Y, and Z connections. And I know that there's research out there that says, you're more likely to become homeless if you don't have communities because you don't have that safety blanket, rah, rah, rah. But there's something on quite a deep level. And I think this is true with a lot of the sector that is just infantilizing and patronizing homeless people. At the same time, what I would say is not having a community is really difficult. And particularly if you have rough slept, particularly for a long time or a short time, but particularly if you've been in supported accommodation, essentially, if you've been institutionalized in some way by the system, when you finally get that secure housing, you fucking miss the, sorry, swearing on live stream, I don't know if that's right actually,
It's
but you
fine.
really miss the community of that institutionalization. And that's something we don't talk about either. We don't talk about when charities say, oh, we need community because the day centre is a community. It is a community and it's a valuable community, but it's also an institution. And we're also institutionalizing people to think that they only deserve that community. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with that community, but like you say, the power imbalances mean that people don't feel like they can be a part of a community that is equal and that isn't sort of, not quite dictatorship, it's not the right word, but do you know what I mean? I feel like I've gone off on a ramble now. Um, yeah, those are my sort of initial thoughts. And then, like I said, I feel like all of my thoughts are contradicting each other, so apologies.
But that's the point, isn't it? It's complex and it's nuanced, and that's the deal, isn't it? And yeah, absolutely fine swearing, by the way. I'm not worried about the old algorithm. Hey, what, Shadna? You what, Sam? Nice to have you here, guys. Um, yeah. So, I mean, oh yeah, go on, Clara.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I think it just takes away their own agency. So, like, instead of building their self-esteem or like getting mental health support, so they can live their best life and just go and choose what they want to do, whether that's join the gym or just sort of things that anyone else would do that isn't homeless. So it just keeps them a bit trapped.
Yeah, I'm gonna probably just go on a couple of tangents based on that kind of thing. So there's a couple of books I want to mention because I think they both have something to say. I'm not quite in fact, the first one I definitely agree with. There's a book called Family and Kinship in East London. It must have been done in the 70s, I guess, by a couple of guys, a couple of sociologists, and they were basically studying the effects on society of kind of communities being cleared out from the East End and kind of moving out to like Harlow and the new towns, basically Stevenage and places like that. And it was I keep returning to it. It's such a good book. I must have read it about 10 years ago, but they were kind of comparing life. So obviously life in the East End in these kind of slum properties, horrible, outside toilets, no central heating, in many ways really horrible. But the community that they kind of would, ask how many times you see your family, and they, basically the guys would be seeing all their kind of guy friends there, and including their immediate family, their dads and stuff at their work because everyone kind of worked in the same trade for their whole life and they had their career like that. They either go to the pub which is there's basically at least one pub on every street. So they go to the pub. The women would be constantly in each other's houses. When they had a baby, they'd be seeing their own mother like every day of the week. They'd be seeing them in-laws, like four out of 7 days, stuff like that. So in many ways, and they'd be lending money to each other, and kind of there wasn't a need for some of the things we see in welfare state now because the community was generally tight knit. And when they moved out to like these kind of new towns, the buildings themselves were really nice. They had kind of central heating and all that sort of stuff. And interestingly, it happened at the same sort of time that the TV became mainstream. And so the kind of authors compare life in the East End, where they were constantly social, all the time, pretty much every hour of the day you were with someone, to a point where you'd now had these kind of nuclear families, living in watching TV in a room, not talking to each other. And I think there's something built into that, which I think about the way we do life and kind of, again, there's a whole lot of stuff around how, because they were moved, communities were moved to different towns, they'd lose contact with 75% of their social contacts immediately. And the author's opinion is, and I have to agree, is that is kind of underpinning the mental health crisis that we're now seeing because we do society differently from what we did then. And as I say, I'm not saying that I agree with you, Shannon, in terms of the communities that you get around homes and services are in many ways as tight knit as you're going to get, far tighter than most people I think would experience. But at the same time, it's kind of, it's not diverse. Everyone's there because they're in a kind of a emergency. So that's just one thought. And the other thought is a book called, oh man, right. Trust me on this one, it's a bit of a strange start, but there's a book called Is Faith Delusion? I think it is. The author's Andrew Sims. Anyway, so the author's definitely Andrew Sims. He was like head of the Royal Psychiatrist Society or something in the early 90s. And he's talking about kind of faith. I'm an atheist, just to kind of say this. I'm not trying to push a religion or anything like that, but he basically talked about the advantages of churches and how, again, you kind of by having churches, you have a natural way for people to form genuine relationships with other people, and that's good for people. He was coming from a mental health point of view, and he said, church is good for people with mental health issues. And that's obviously a generalization. There are exceptions to that, but again, we don't have, church is kind of dying out. It seems certainly a lot of places it is, and so we don't have the ability to. We don't have the kind of same sorts of ways that people can actually just genuinely do life together. And as I say, the only way I can see homelessness services or homeless sector can really do anything about it would be through things like co-production, because actually co-production builds genuine community because you're equals. You're doing, certainly for me as a guy, I don't want to just sit in a room talking to people. I want to be doing something. But when I used to go to church myself, I'd get there early and kind of put the chairs out, and that was something about kind of doing it with other people. That was a really good way to get to know people. But I just don't see that the homeless sector can do it very effectively in any other way. So yeah, again, that's kind of where I'm at with it, and I think, I just wonder if there are better ways of doing that kind of community building that I guess the homeless sector can't, it doesn't kind of frustrate. I don't think it can do it on its own by any means, or even kind of play a big part in it. But I think there are things it can do that would potentially damage kind of social relationships. And I would say institute a lot of support accommodation is just not a good place to build community at all. And I think the kind of going back to the original comment about community is what ends homelessness. I feel that's a bit of a cop out from a sector to say, yeah, we can't. It's too difficult to house people, so we're going to try and build community instead. But that doesn't get anyone housed. So I don't know. I'm a bit like you, Shannon. I've got kind of what's the word, ambivalence. Different thinking, different kind of perspectives on it really. But I think it's a good thing to think about and to kind of work out. Shannon?
I think, building on what Clara was saying around like actually like different activities, like going to the gym or doing whatever. So during it was about a year or so, a couple of years ago, we did quite a bit of work with then the Department of Levelling Up around co-production, and it was around this theme of like communities actually. And most people said that they didn't want like these activities. Do you know how like mental health services do it all the time with like recovery colleges, and they're like, oh, come do cooking or come do gardening, and it's all people that have mental health diagnosis. Now for some people that's really, really helpful, each to their own. For me, I couldn't think of anything worse, because I am more than my mental health diagnosis, and even if I enjoy those things, like that's not necessarily the shared interest I want to start building relationships on. And so actually it was actually just like, instead of building separate communities and isolating homeless people or ex-homeless people of like, you can now go to this club or you can now do this activity, it was like, let's just remove the barriers. Why are they not going to the local Zumba class? Well, actually it's because of money, or it's because of confidence, or it's because of whatever. Like, let's remove those barriers to increase communities rather than make a new community. Like, there are communities out there that already exist. We don't have to be I think there's so much, and I'm going off topic a bit, but there's so much in the sector where it's like, let's be imaginative, let's think outside of the box, let's come up with these new innovative solutions to homelessness and whatever. And it's like, communities already exist. Like, clubs already exist, hobbies already exist. If people aren't doing them, let's work out what the barriers are. And then like, but that's almost separate to, like you say, the homelessness stuff. That's all I wanted to say, sorry. And yeah, I think co-production is an area where you can get genuine community. I was going to say that in my first rant, but I didn't want to be too biased, so I left it out. But I do believe that. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I had this thought the other day. Again, it's like it's just very raw, but because I saw it, again, something advertised. I think a charity is running, kind of come do cooking classes so you can learn how to cook healthily. I was like, all right, already I don't like this, but it reminded me of someone I used to work with in Bedford. So this, I guess every area's got got people that everyone kind of knows because they've been homeless for so long, and kind of there's one lady in particular. I mean, she's passed away now, but she rough slept since childhood. Basically, we're now, she's probably in her 40s by this stage. Yeah, what we kind of describe as kind of very chaotic kind of lifestyle and stuff. But I remember she had this. I used to kind of go to the soup kitchen and kind of volunteer there and stuff. And I remember like she was doing well, particular kind of little period. And she basically came into the kitchen to help us cook for everyone coming in. And I, she seemed genuinely over the moon to be able to do that. And kind of, it wasn't just kind of learning how to cook healthily for the, it was actually she was just helping people that she knew, helping peers and so on. And I would say that, again, there was an essence. I'm not saying that was true co-production, but there was a kind of essence of co-production there in terms of everyone's there to work together to kind of do a service, and I just felt like that was certainly valuable for her at the time. And but they kind of that again, it wasn't just kind of learn to cook more healthy. There was a purpose. Come and help some other people basically, and that kind of was a bit of a vehicle for her.
So maybe the answer to communities then is like not passiveness, but it's about action. Like, whatever that is, it's doing something is about action, whether you're being actively involved in something or you're whatever it is, rather than just passively existing or turning up to a space and just being and having stuff done to you. Like, it's that action.
Yeah, Clara.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, in a way, like the homeless, they've already got their own community, haven't they? Especially when they've been institutionalized in supported living, it's like they're surrounded with people who they really understand each other, don't they? So, and another thing of supported accommodation, which is why I don't like it, is that because of the benefits, you can't work. And I feel like work is like employment. Of course, there will be some people who can't work due to mental health problems or disabilities, but there's probably a lot of people that would really benefit from employment, and that would help get them integrated into society. But they can't. And then the longer that they're in the environment, then they almost lose their confidence. Like I've seen people lose, and because they're the institutionalization where they're getting told what to do all the time, and then it's a very particular community, isn't it? So then things like going to the gym, or like they start to lose the confidence, and then the gap sort of gets bigger and bigger, until it's actually very difficult to pull somebody out of that, into, I suppose what we would call normal community, like church, like that sort of thing.
Yeah. There's a I've never actually kind of plugged it on this channel, not plugged it, but the right word. But there's a guy called Math Potts. Basically, he published a book earlier this year called Friends and Purpose, and he starts the book by saying he was basically talking at a conference. He's kind of like quite well known guy, and he was basically asked people, like, just close your eyes and think of a really kind of really good experience in your life, like kind of a favorite experience. And he basically said, right, I bet every single one of you thought about a time with either friends or purpose. So most people, like, the best times in life will be friends. For a smaller amount of people, it'll be purpose. And so his whole thing's like kind of public living rooms where he'll just turn up in a town and kind of put a sofa on the middle of the kind of kind of pedestrianised area, and just kind of see who walks by and just kind of chat to them and have a bit of fun. But I remember him. I first heard him talk maybe 15 years ago, and it absolutely kind of changed the direction of my thinking and stuff. But he basically made the point. I think, in fact, he said, he'd been homeless himself. He basically said, whenever you kind of meet someone, effectively the first real question that they have about you is, what do you do for a living? And you say, Clara, when you're not working, that's immediately you're just kind of at this huge disadvantage, because you don't because employment is so central to our purpose and our kind of our sense of self, and just ability to kind of have confidence to be seen as kind of on equal terms with other people. So yeah as I say, these aren't going to be definitive conversations. Oh, sorry, Shannon, go for it.
Nah, I just, without sliding into like supported accommodation or benefit chat, but like I've been in supported accommodation, what, 8 years now ish in total, maybe 9. And I only recently, and I work in this sector for however many years, I've only recently found out that if you're in supported accommodation, as long as your universal credit is at least £1, like, so it's open every month, you can work whilst in supported accommodation and you will get the full housing benefit whack.
Even
So
when it's
there
like
is,
thousands of pounds a month sort of thing, that with
well, so as long as you're not earning enough to close your universal credit down, so it doesn't close down your housing benefit, you will get the full whack of housing benefit whilst in supported accommodation. So like, all right, you might not be able to get a full-time job on a brilliant wage, but you could get something. Like, you could maybe start rebuilding that confidence, or start getting out there, or the volunteering, or whatever it might be, and it not cost you your accommodation. And then part of me was like, surely other professionals in the sector know this. Like, surely, this can't just be like, I don't, there's the conspiracy inside of me where I'm then like, why do people not know about this? Like, why are we holding people down for a reason? Or like, I don't know. And look, feel free, guys, to fact check that. Like I said at the beginning, this is not legal
no,
advice.
yeah,
Do
no, I
not
think
make life decisions based on what we're saying. But it's blown my mind because so
Yeah,
many people start rebuilding that.
because I can think of at least like 6 supported accommodations that I know that have the rule is very clear. Like, if you work, then it's a breach of license. So you're
Wow.
out, basically. So that's really interesting. That's a really interesting thing to look into.
And I'm pretty sure. Oh, on a minute, I'm echoing. I'm pretty sure like I can dig out where it says that, because I remember I heard for the first time recently, actually someone said it in the Facebook group. I mean, it kind of makes you think, if homeless charities, like if they were just to kind of start employing people, kind of doing, kind of even if it's just kind of non kind of essential kind of work roles, whatever, just doing cleaning 1 day a week or something like that in the supported accommodation, then you're going to get a lot of people getting out of the benefit cap for stuff. I'm just thinking of, kind of mums and stuff in that sort of situation. But you could effectively have a situation where people can start actually kind of, getting work experience and accruing experience and stuff, and kind of working forward, just if they were to to start actually kind of, again, you could kind of just create, decent co-production roles that are just very small time. I saw that recently actually on someone making the point that a lot of lived experience roles are full time, and it's like, well, that's a big jump. Why not just be kind of setting the number of hours much lower so that people can kind of ease into it and kind of do it that way. So yeah, cool. Well, we're going 25 minutes. That's not bad, is it, for one thing? So I'm sure we might return to this at some point in the future. Um, but I don't know if you guys have got any preferences, what bullet point we cover next. If not, I'll just pick one at random and start talking. No? Okay. Shannon, any? No? Cool. So I'm going to pick up. This is going to be quite a short one, actually. Again, it's just kind of me thinking aloud, really. But so I put down the list Nurse Ratched. So and I'm trying to think why I kind of thought about this recently, but I saw a worker base and I thought, oh shit, man, this is a proper Nurse Ratched getting involved here. But it was interesting because it made me think, because I've watched the film like multiple times, and I've read the book, and it's one of the few films which I'd say is better than the book, although the book's really good, well worth reading. But for me, the thing which makes the book not quite so good as the film is, and I don't want to get into kind of too much like film critic stuff here, but I would say when you watch the film, it feels like Nurse Ratched thinks she's doing a good job, whereas in the book she probably does know she's an absolute nightmare. And it just made me, I mean, I first thought about this years and years ago, but kind of first it kind of made me think, well, I think I'm a nice guy. Maybe I'm a Nurse Ratched, kind of doing a lot of harm without realizing it. And I've talked before about, certainly when I went to the night shelter, I probably did more harm than good. But yeah, it just made me think about, first of all, how do we know as individuals, we're doing a good job, and kind of, we are kind of a force for good, so to speak. But also just how, I don't know. I mean, what do we do when we see professionals in the sector just being really horrific? I'm thinking of one individual I've had dealings with before specifically, but I'm just thinking, like, I don't know, like how do you spot them? Maybe these aren't questions you can really answer tonight, but how do you kind of spot them, and what do you do about them when you see just kind of sadists working in the sector, kind of, under the auspices of kind of, doing a good job and kind of helping people out and stuff, when really they just do genuinely seem to not consciously do it, but they kind of enjoy the kind of the power games and stuff that they've got there. So I don't know, as I say, I'm not sure if that really opens up a conversation, but it was just a thought I had recently, which I just want to, I guess, just put out there, see if anyone kind of notices anything about it. But if not, it's all good. Oh, Shannon.
Well, feel free to take this as a rhetorical question. Feel free to take this as a rhetorical question. But what made you stop being a worker in the sector and everything else? Because, like, so for me, it was purely like my lived experience and the training, and then coupled with an opportunity to be able to do different. And the reality is, if that opportunity hadn't come along to work at Just Us, I probably would have stayed in the charity sector for longer than I was going to, even though I could have foreseen burnout and mental health breakdown because of it. So yeah, I've answered it, but you don't have to. But I just think,
No.
if we're thinking about what's worked for us, I guess, as to see the light. Do you know what I mean? Like, how do
Yeah.
we convert other people?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I don't mind answering it at all. I think so. For me, there's probably maybe like a handful of like just kind of moments that I think that one of the first ones was probably working in the night shelter. So the night shelter was horrible, man. We thought it was brilliant. It was horrible. And most of the residents were basically angry all the time, angry at staff. And we kind of did this kind of little mental gymnastics thing where we kind of said, oh, that's because they're homeless and they're not very grateful people. The reality was is because it was a horrible institution to be in, and we didn't listen to people at all. And so for me, I mean, I don't know how many people had to say the same kind of things for me to realize, okay, I think maybe these guys might be right about this stuff. The couple of people in particular, one's called Tom. He's sadly passed away now. Others as well. I won't kind of list names and stuff. But for me, there was this kind of like, I just had this moment where I thought, shit, man, these guys are right. And they kind of probably 95% of the complaints that were being made, all verbally, because people wouldn't bother with written complaints because they knew it was a waste of time. But kind of the verbal complaints people would make, 95% they were bang on. And that probably took me 4 years to kind of really sort of start seeing that. I mentioned before, like Math Potts, hearing him talk, he kind of said a lot of stuff in that kind of presentation he did where it just hit the nail on the head. He talked about he gave a story about, I think it might have, I might be wrong about this. It might have been the Crypt up in Leeds. I think the Crypt is a famous sort of night shelter type place, and he kind of went up to visit. He was in, I don't know what role he was in, and kind of the night shelter manager sort of like put his arm around this homeless guy and said, here's Jimmy. Doesn't he love it here? Don't you love it here? Don't you, Jimmy? And just kind of really, I was like, shit, man, we're like that. We had like a barring list of like 150 or 200 people. And I don't know, we thought we were doing a good job. 200 people were excluded from our service because mostly for petty stuff. So yeah, that happened. I'm trying to think what else happened. Some other stuff happened as well, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't know why. I mean, I know people who've worked in the sector longer than I have and just don't listen. So they're still kind of think, oh yeah, this is just homeless people being difficult and ungrateful. So I don't
know. There's something there though. Like, so I was in a talk this morning. They were talking about media campaigns and stuff, and they were basically saying that the general public have to see something 3 or 4 times before it sinks in, and if it's more than that, it becomes annoying and it goes out of their brain again. So there's something there about that, and obviously, like, basically lived experience being the driver there, which love. But there's also something around, how do I is it what, like 7 times that someone in a domestic abusive relationship has to ask for help before they leave, or tries to leave 7 times before they finally do leave, and what have you. And there's almost a messy comparison there between if a worker is also institutionalized and being abused by the charity, the system, whatever you want to call it, that actually it might take 7 times and lived experience and people who have been through this going, you can do this, that it can be different, because look, we're telling you it can be different by X, Y, and Z, and that co-production sort of stuff. I wonder how we get people to stop being Nurse Ratched, which, by the way, I haven't seen the film in years and years and years, and I was like, probably won't talk about this today, so I'll watch it in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, I'll rewatch it.
Well, if you watch it and then kind of want to add to it, that's cool. Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of the ways. I mean, I guess just to kind of talk about co-production, like it's a bit of jargon, isn't it? Or it's becoming a bit of jargon. I might talk about that in a minute actually as well. But so true co-production, and Shannon, you might add to this as well, but is essentially where people using a service are integral at every single level of the organization in terms of how that service is delivered. And I guess ideally people who are currently sort of living or very recently living in that kind of service, they kind of have first-hand experience what it is. And I guess the idea is that they have a wisdom from their perspective, and wisdom is an overused word, but they have a kind of an insight into the everything, the power dynamics, everything that otherwise people, professionals, just won't see. So again, as an example of this, the number of times I've seen supported accommodation in particular, but homeless service in general, kind of give like some sort of glowing feedback, report back on some glowing feedback they've had, and they have no insight into the fact that they are that person's landlord at the moment, and that person cannot say anything else than that. They are, there's their own little game, kind of having to play their own little game to kind of stay on the right side of the staff. And yet it seems that most professionals just just don't see that dynamic at all. They don't notice it. And whereas someone with lived experience would be able to kind of say, this is what you're doing here by putting someone in that position, putting them on the pedestal or whatever. So yeah, go on, Clara.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I think there are definitely people that are sadistic. Like I met a housing officer who definitely was. And I think in that instance, you can just complain and point out how what he's doing is completely immoral, or, I mean, not only not following the law, but it's just completely out of order, and just hope that, you know, it makes a difference. But other people, like Shannon was saying, that have been in the system for so long, and I don't even think they're necessarily bad people, but they don't realize what they're doing is wrong. So, like a manager that recently kicked someone out of supported living, and said something like, "You've got 48 hours to get your stuff, or I'll bin it." Like when I put a complaint through to the supported review team, who monitor them, like he genuinely came back apologetic and like wanted to change things. And it's almost like that they're so used to the perspective of the way they're seeing it that they do need people to change, to show them that. And that's the same with like councillors, the MP, like even the, you know, the managers at the council. Like you just, they sort of need people to pipe up, like, you know, how I've been using a lot of stuff in your videos, because that's changed my perspective, which I can then put across to change their perspective. And not for everyone, but for a few, it does plant the seed.
Yeah, I think it's worth. I mean, you're right. I think I've also met say this. I think genuine say this, literal say this in the sector. Complaining about them does do something, even though often the complaint will come back and say, yeah, that didn't happen, or yeah, kind of denial or whatever. But I mean, it puts their bosses in a position. They must realise that there's truth in the complaints, and therefore they either kind of like look to take action to kind of remove that person from the team, uh, or conversely they might in one sense I'm pretty sure some council or some sadists get a pat on the back saying well done, because there's certainly in my experience working in Bedford, um, the majority of housing officers were good people, I think, but the prevailing culture weirdly was quite nasty. But there was this kind of when someone kind of stood their ground for the council and kind of insisted that they were going to gatekeep or they'd done nothing wrong or whatever. That seemed to be something which but from the wrong manager, so to speak, from a bad manager, that would be seen as like a good thing and they get promoted. So I saw kind of really I saw some crazy things happening. um I remember like I made this complaint once about this, yeah, similar to the one you're describing, Clara, I think. And so I put the complaint. It was a good complaint. This was like blatant, unlawful stuff. And then, yeah, kind of before the complaint response had come back, I found out this guy was now team leader. He'd been promoted. And I'm sure that when councils employ temps, they kind of know, they kind of they want a particular type of person who's going to be outrageous, gatekeep a lot, and then not be around long enough to actually kind of have how be held accountable for it. But I think, yeah, so complaining is absolutely important because at least it tells the council management like that something's wrong. And fair play to the kind of one about who disposed of or threatened to dispose of the property and actually said sorry, apologize for it. That's quite rare, I think. There aren't many professionals who are kind of big enough to admit something's wrong and kind of and kind of change the course and change policies and stuff. So yeah, both's important. So I've just seen the live chat, guys. Just to say, we're not taking questions on the law tonight. That's going to be for Thursday. So, and also just to say, please don't share personal data, just for the usual reasons. So, I'm not being horrible to you. I'm just going to just remove some of those, just there. So how you like, Mo? Yeah. So this is just yeah, us three talking about some things which are happening in the sector, trying to just refine our thinking on it really, and just kind of putting stuff out there that might be of interest to other people. So yeah, um, yeah. Anything we want to say else on that one, guys? Or we kind of go on,
Just
Shannon.
yeah, sorry, just a final like thing is I think this sector, like say that manager, for example, that said, "Oh, sorry, like that's awful. I can't believe I did that. Like obviously that's a mistake." I don't think the sector allows for it allows a little bit for accountability. If we take the fact that people can complain, there are complaints procedures, and we ignore the power imbalance that stops people from complaining, we put that to one side for a minute, there is some accountability. But what there is none of is space to change. Like, there is no space for organizations to make changes. And I'm not just talking like, let's change a couple of lines in a policy, but like, if you were to think about a cultural shift within a team or training or whatever it might be, that all does cost money. And I think the way that the funding is set up with like strict sort of purposes and needs and aims, even if an organization wanted to change the way they were doing things, and this goes back to what you were saying about co-production, right? Like, if an organization was like, right, we want to do co-production, there's no funding for that. It's not automatically built into bids. And kudos, there are some bids out there that like you have to be involved in lived experience, but then there's no accountability checking up on how you're doing that. You know, there's no sort of like, actually, are you just doing a survey? Because that's not co-production. Or are you actually doing co-production and it's like shared power and everything else? So I think that's quite a big thing if we want individuals, those good individuals within the sector, to not just realize that they've done a bad thing or they're doing bad things and then feel crap about it. If we want them to actually act on that bad feeling, then we need to make space for them. Make space is such a cringy term, isn't it? But we need to make space for them to actually have, like, to make those changes, make those cultural changes, improve training, improve expertise, get rid of staff and bring new staff in, like reassess all of their policies, start co-production, whatever it is. And I don't think we're set up to do that. And that no one in the sector is asking for that either. They're asking for money for prevention. They're asking for money that goes further than 2 years. They're asking for long-term funding, but no one's asking for funding that allows cultural shift or basically allowing them to make mistakes and it not cost them their whole organization and charity and livelihood.
Yeah. I've just, sorry, I was just typing that, Shannon. I've written that on our list of things to discuss in future because I think there's obviously lots of different things in there. I think the thing about people not complaining and not kind of feeling able to voice kind of problems is something I think we're good to come back to. And I've now forgotten what I was going to say on the back of what you did, the other things you said. It'll come back to me in a moment. Yeah, so the culture, that's so I think that the way the homeless sector operates in India, in terms of, I think you're bang on with just describing the culture there of kind of like there's just not that ability to kind of admit wrongdoing and kind of and change. I think that comes down from effectively trickles down from central government, where you've got like, yeah, there's literally very little kind of room for acknowledging an error and kind of just not being like absolutely hounded for it. So and that kind of creates an inauthenticity in the conversations that happen. And I would say that inauthenticity is like a really big issue for us. Just I'll give an example of that where, in Bedford Borough Council is not authentic about the fact that they gate kept systematically for years, and that is something I will be whinging on about at some point soon, because their official position is, yeah, there were some the individual cases, but it wasn't systemic, and I'm like, yeah, we'll see about that. But that lack of the fact that Bedford Borough Council can't say we used to gatekeep, we're trying really hard not to now. The fact they can't say that in any level, like with any conversations with other providers, charities and so on, has, in my opinion, I'm obviously speculating to some level, but is what's caused this problem. So for those who haven't seen the stream before, I work in Bedford, and Bedford's my local council, and they have increased TA capacity, particularly for single homes people, by thousands of percent over the years, which should be a good thing because that should be a step closer to ending homelessness. But what's happened is that local charities, because they weren't interested in what was really going on, and the council didn't tell them we've increased this capacity. There was a time when they were scratching their head saying, "Oh, we've got loads of voids. What do we do?" And supported accommodation providers, rather than thinking, "Oh, great, homelessness is going down," what they said was, "Well, let's just get people from further afield and kind of stick them in here." So now we've got a situation in Bedford where the supported accommodation providers essentially, kind of have this inflow into Bedford Borough Council, and cut a long story short, it's because there haven't been those authentic conversations about what's really going on. So yeah, because I think the charity bosses that I know of, we're not aware of that dynamic at all. Um, so yeah, there was other stuff you said there, Shannon, as well, which I was going to follow on from. But as I say, I've written down because I think that's a good one to return to. Yeah, I think, and I guess in the current climate, it just takes a very brave leader of a charity to actually be willing to kind of set a good example of, like, yeah, we fuck up sometimes and we're going to improve, sort of thing, rather than we're always perfect and if you fuck up, you're going to go. So yeah, but yeah, I don't know. It seems to be one of those age-old problems in just how British people do government in general, kind of like, charity sector, all that sort of stuff. We just have this, payments by results, performance indicator type mentality, which unfortunately has some big downsides too. So, yeah, cool. How you, Anton? Nice to have you here, mate. We've got 15 minutes left. Should we try and tackle one more thing before we go? Is that all right? So, I mean, again, unless you say something, I'm gonna just pick something at random. So there's one I want to come back to another week, which is how much is a homeless person worth, which by which I mean how much money can services extract from homeless people if they keep them homeless? Because I think that's, I mean, the reason I don't want to do it tonight, because I want to do a bit of research first. But if you look at the amount of money charities make out of homeless people, you'd rather give them, kind of give people money directly, quite frankly. But the one what I just kind of mentioned, this is something which it's certainly been rumbling around the sector for a few years now. And again, being the contrary sort of person I am, I take some issues with it, which is this idea of having data systems where the kind of, it's sold as, people only have to tell their story once. So you tell your story to one worker, and then that data then gets shared to every other worker who might ever come across it. And it seems to kind of be garnering a bit of popularity from various people. Kind of, it's a good thing. Having to tell your story multiple times is something which people say consistently is, can even be traumatic. Certainly, it's unpleasant and stressful. But then I guess my opposition to it is the fact that there is a huge issue with data protection compliance in the sector as it is. And I'll give you some examples of that at some point soon. But for me, it just seems to be like a bit of a Trojan horse kind of way of getting even more data out of homeless people and sharing it even more widely without their full knowledge. And that in turn can lead to some pretty unpleasant, kind of results for people who are actually going through the sector. So yeah, sad. I mean, Shannon just had to pop out, but Shannon might know more about it than me and Clara do in terms of kind of knowing where the sector's at with it at the moment. But I've seen very specific instances where highly sensitive data has been shared without that person's knowledge or their consent or anything, as just kind of like a default thing. Like it wasn't even like a particularly bad case. It was just happening all the time. And there's kind of systems in place, things like Chain and Inform and stuff like that, which I don't know too much about how it all works in practice. But again, from a data protection point of view, it would be rather troubling to see how widely data is used. I'm not going to name the person who said this, but it just made a really good point a couple of months ago to me, just to say that we talk about particularly rough sleepers, as being like invisible. And actually, rough sleepers are like the most documented people out there. They're discussed in endless meetings. They're recorded on endless data, kind of IT systems and so on. They're not invisible. Everyone knows that they're out there. And actually, for a lot of people, that would be distressing to know that your data has been shared with the police and mental health services without your knowledge, and all those other kind of things. So, yeah, that's the kind of the starting point, really. So, Shannon, I don't know how much if you caught any of that. But I don't know, like in terms of, I mean, have you heard it kind of coming back around anytime recently? Sort of that push for this kind of like widespread sharing.
Yeah, so I think it's a constant at the minute. That we sort of, it's that whole like, it's being sold under, being trauma informed and not re-traumatizing people. And really interestingly, if in my experience, and obviously again, just to clarify, if you ask like lived experience people, they won't all have the same opinion on things. That's like a misconception. But overall, the people I've worked with that have lived experience think it's a really good thing. And I think it's because of the way it's being framed. Like, they don't want to have to tell their story over and over again. I think for me, the solution is, because it doesn't work. Sharing data with various organizations doesn't mean that you actually have to tell your worker less. And you can look at the NHS for that. Like, you know, we've got the NHS app. You still go to an appointment and the GP still goes, "What's wrong? What did you come to for us for the last 2 weeks?" Because they don't have time to look. So we're expecting this to work, but we're not built as a sector for this to work anyway. So, and I think that's the problem that people with lived experience have with it, is that, you know, they've consented to all these things that they don't quite frankly understand, and yet they're still being re-traumatized. And so for me, I think on this one, I would really prioritize, and without sounding patronizing, but I don't think it is patronizing, because I just think this isn't specific to homeless people. This is specific to everyone in England, pretty much. I think educating people on their basic data protection rights is the best thing in this situation. Like, I think in some ways, and I say that because people with lived experience don't want to tell their story over and again, on the whole, and people on the whole want that information to be shared so they don't have to worry about it, so they don't have to carry paperwork around from this appointment to this appointment, so they have less to manage. And that's potentially a whole other conversation as to why that's the case. But I think if you were to educate people on their rights, then actually you're doing something to redress that power imbalance. And you can say, actually, you can pick and choose who this referral gets sent off to. You can, you know, rectify information when it's wrong about you and it's coming from CMHT or whoever. Medical information is a bit difficult, but yeah, you know, you have a right to withdraw your consent at any time. And I think particularly when I've worked with clients, say it like Just Us doing casework and stuff, a lot of the time it starts off that relationship way more positive when you actually explain what you're doing with their information, because they go, "Oh, I didn't realize I could do that." You're like, yeah, this is your information, I'm just borrowing it, like, and I'm only borrowing it for X, Y, and Z, and you can tell me when to stop, what to stop, you can request all of your information back because it's yours. Like, and I think if you were to tell people their rights at the start of appointments, then that sharing of their story would also become less traumatic because they're trusting you more. The reason it's often traumatizing is because they tell their story to a professional and then the professional does nothing with it. That's what's really traumatizing, right? If you tell your story to a professional and they go, "We can get you housed," or, "Oh, we can get your abusive ex away from you," or whatever the situation is, suddenly it's less traumatizing. It's only re-traumatizing, in my opinion, when you're constantly telling professional after professional and you're not getting any actual help from it. And I think that's got nothing to do with data sharing. That's got to do with what professionals are doing in the sector and their education on legal rights, their education on what they can actually do to help their clients. Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfect sense. Yeah, I wondered, so when people are kind of, you know, when whoever's driving this is kind of like getting feedback from the sector or whatever, I wonder how much people are, you know, kind of how much details people are given, how much information people are given about what's been proposed and how it would be managed. Because, you know, you can, I mean, I'm not saying you can't share data legally, obviously you can, but in one sense, you know, if you don't understand how it's been used, you cannot possibly give consent. You might have signed a consent form. That's not the same thing as giving consent. It's something else. And unfortunately, a lot of professionals don't get any sort of training on this sort of thing, so they just don't misunderstand it badly.
100%. And just like, sorry, because I'm jumping in again. But on the, I think lots of the professionals who are suggesting this, and whether that's civil servants or frontline workers or whatever, I don't think they understand data protection or the rights either. And I think so many clients will go, yeah, I don't care, do what you like. And to me, like, geez, if someone said that to me, I'd be like, dude, you should care. Like, you've got like more self-worth than just not caring about your own information. Like, this is, and why I say that, because it's absolutely fine to say you don't care once you know what's going to happen with your data. Once you know what your rights are, then absolutely you're making an informed choice there, which is what consent's all about, right? Like, informed consent about, you can absolutely say, don't care, do whatever you like with my information. I'm fairly like that. In very, odd circumstances, I'll care, but most of the time I'm like, yeah, have whatever, like, don't bother me. But that's because I know that I can withdraw at any time. I know that I can rectify the information, all of these different things. And I think if the staff who are suggesting this don't know their own data rights, because let's be honest, I doubt their employers ever explained it to them, and they've done, some 15-minute online training thing, then how on earth do the clients stand a chance?
Yeah. Clara?
Yeah, I just wanted to say about, so when they're sharing this data, so like I read a big subject access request where say there's like 10 professionals discussing 2 secs, discussing someone, and it almost dissolves each person of responsibility. So it's like, well, we're here sending this email about him and this and or her and this, and then nothing actually gets done, and it like takes that human element away. So in some ways, if each of those professionals had to contact the person, like on one hand, I do think it definitely would be traumatizing for the person having to explain it again, but on the other hand, it could increase the likelihood of the professional actually taking action, because then they've actually spoke to the person, and it's like it's a person, there's a human here, it's not just a name on an email. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess it comes back to, like, I don't know. I guess you just can't like have any policy or any kind of legislation which makes workers like kind of do this stuff well. I mean, I think data protection is a good example of, like, it stops people doing outrageous things in theory if people understood the law. But yeah, you're right. I mean, they're thinking one time it doesn't make workers suddenly be like really good at their jobs, and kind of effective and kind of responsive and stuff. Um, so yeah, not quite sure what's going on in the live stream chat, but yeah, we'll leave them to it. So yeah, that brings us up to 8:30 pretty much. So any final thoughts at all, guys? As I say, we'll do this again sometime. We'll be back on Thursday for like the normal Q&A. So yeah, if you kind of got a question about a particular issue, whatever, just yeah, best way to do it is just put it on a comment on the channel, and I'll get the notification and just take it there. But yeah, other than that, I think that's it. Thanks, Clara. Thanks, Shannon. Appreciate your time. And again, for those out there, hopefully this has been, yeah, some, I don't know, food for thought, if nothing else, and just kind of, I don't know, if people are kind of watching and want a particular thing discussed in this setting, then by all means stick it on a comment or something somewhere. And as I say, any comment on any video on this channel, I'll get notifications for it. So that's the best way to probably get in contact, and kind of add it to the list or whatever. So yeah, other than that, guys, if you're around on the live stream on Thursday, we'll see you then. If not, take it easy, guys. And yeah, we've got a heat wave coming at me, so I'm sure we'll be whinging about the weather by Thursday evening.